Okay, we are good to go. Hello and welcome everyone to the 50th episode of the IET India Digital Conversations. Yes, it is episode number 50 and we can't keep calm. I mean, what a journey it has been since we started off on the 27th of March 2020, uh, a little over 2 years now. And we started off with the first episode on navigating our careers through the pandemic. But little did we know what started as an applied technology series to cope up with the pandemic would go on to become one of the most credible, inspiring, informing, and influencing platform or global platform, which is influencing the global engineering and technology community through these digital masterpieces. In these 2 years, we addressed some key topics like mental health and wellness, telehealth, urban mobility, future cities powered by blockchain. We talked about 5G for industries, human machine interactions in manufacturing. We talked about quantum computing in India, intelligent transportation systems, robotic responses, the future of gig and shared economy, and many, many more. And through these, we were able to reach out to more than 50,000 people in over 52 countries, out of which we had close to 15,000 of them who registered for these events. With a star studded speakers lineup, we could bring close to 200 of these global experts. Who talked about the platform, and we reached out to them all across the globe. But all of these was achievable and possible because of all of you who, irrespective of your hectic schedule, surfing through the deadly waves of the pandemic, and of course, the countless webinars happening across the web, you guys still managed to log in every Friday and gave credibility to the series. So, on behalf of the entire IET, I'm truly humbled by your presence and would like to thank all of you again for joining us today for yet another insightful discussion. I'm Suman Bhaumik, your host for the series, and I lead the events development and business for the IIT in India. And before we begin our session today, please allow me to take a couple of minutes and tell you a little bit about the IIT and our session today. The Institution of Engineering and Technology, also known as the IET, is a 150 years old global organization inspiring, informing, and influencing the global engineering and technology community to engineer a better world. As a diverse home across engineering and technology, we share knowledge that helps make sense of the world to solve the challenges that matter. At IIT India, we want to grow actionable knowledge, want to solve India centric engineering issues, and want to enhance people's lives using the technology and thought leadership to drive innovation. I have a short video with me here which talks about what the IT is all about and what are the benefits of joining us as a community.
Our world is changing.
Engineering is changing.
Society is changing.
We are changing.
We're here to inspire,
Inform.
Influence.
Change perceptions.
Demonstrating how important engineers and technicians are in our lives.
Championing achievements.
Helping to create new technologies that enable us to thrive.
And inspiring future generations to make a difference.
Together, we discover new concepts by turning theory into practice.
Create solutions to society's biggest challenges.
Share knowledge and expertise through our networks.
Grow by developing new skills and capabilities.
Evolve and adapt for the future.
We are the IET.
Together, we are engineering a better world.
So that was all about us. But now coming back to all of you. As we said, today's session, we are talking about technology for peace. And we are joined by the best of the best from various facets of industries and practices. And these speakers that have joined us today from various parts of the world will cover key aspects of peacekeeping in a way that you've never imagined before. So without any further ado, let's introduce our speakers. Introducing our first speaker is Dr. Lisa Search, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the Toda Institute of Peace, USA. Dr. Lisa is a professor of the practice of peace building and the Starman Chair in peace studies at the University of Notre Dame's Crocs Institute for International Peace Studies. She also directs the social media technology and peace building program for the Toda Peace Institute. A former Fulbright Fellow in East and West Africa, Dr. Lisa is the author of 11 books, including Social Media Impacts on Conflict and Democracy, The Tectonic Shift. Our next speaker is Lyric Jain, founder and CEO of Logically, who joins us from the UK. Lyric is an entrepreneur and engineer who founded Logically in 2017. Logically now works with governments, businesses, and platforms around the world to uncover and address harmful misinformation and deliberate disinformation. Lyric was named Enterprise CXO of the Year in the UK's COGX Awards last year and was announced as an honoree in the 2020 Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe list in the Social Entrepreneurs category. In 2021, Logically was awarded the 11th annual Aegis Graham Bell Award for Innovation in Artificial Intelligence. The company has teams in Bangalore, Delhi, and Mysore, as well as in the UK and US. Our next speaker joins us from Delhi, Pranav Bajaj, the co-founder of Medulence. Pranav is a commerce graduate who drives partner acquisition at Medulence. He brings in rich startup experience from his time at Zomato, where he led the company's business development activities in the Delhi NCR region across specific categories. With inspiring vigor, Pranav pushes Medulence in both in terms of growth and focusing on getting the right feedback on the product from the market. A tennis enthusiast, Pranav takes these lessons from the court to the workplace, making him a great team player. And next we have Vignesh Santhanam, who is the India lead for drones and tomorrow's aerospace at the World Economic Forum's Future of Mobility platform. And Vignesh has been actively involved in implementing drones in healthcare logistics through the Medicine from the Sky initiative. He was the president from 2017 to 2019 and founding member of the Drone Federation of India, the voice of India's UAV industry that focuses on industry advocacy, governance, and policy. In 2018, as part of the DFI, he commissioned the Drone Festival of India, where he's attending from actually today, the biggest commercial UAV conference in the region. Alongside this, he headed marketing and digital initiatives for Quidditch Innovation Labs, one of India's leading UAV companies based out of Mumbai. And finally, coming to our moderator for this session, Charles Assisi, who is the co-founder of Founding Fuel and the co-author of The Aadhaar Effect. Charles is an award-winning journalist with 2 decades of experience to back him. He is the co-founder and director at Founding Fuel and co-author of the book The Aadhaar Effect. He is a columnist for Hindustan Times and one of India's most influential English newspaper. I'll request you to take over now, Charles, and give us a cracker of a 50th episode that we all have been expecting, and keep it more engaging and interactive, which the audience obviously likes. So over to you, Charles. Can you hear us, Charles?
Funny. Yes, I can. I hope you can hear me.
Yes. Now
we
can. Now we can, Charles. Go on, please.
Okay. I'm so sorry about this because I certainly feel like a cracker on fire right now because, I'm on a patchy internet connection. Airtel has decided to give me, Airtel is making me feel so jittery because my network has decided to, just blow up and I'm on a hotspot. So my apologies in advance if I sound a bit patchy every once in a while. So just flag me off. Okay, Suman, you've been most kind in the introductions. Thank you so much. And over the last few days, I've had the pleasure of interacting one-on-one with each of the panelists. Suman just interacted, and everyone has fascinating backstories. So to begin with, what we'll do with over the next 60 to 65 minutes, let's listen into each one of them. And as we do, may I urge you to type your questions or comments that occur in the chat box out here. Suman is looking at it, and between the both of us, we'll get the panel to respond to it. Now, we'll explore this in different parts. The first thing that struck me after speaking to each of them is that the thing that drives technology is us humans. And when we look at it from the outside, what we forget forget is that there are very real people here to work and to create technology, and there are very strong reasons to do what they are doing. All of them have deeply personal stories that have shaped their thinking and that has got them to do what they're doing. And I don't want to be the one who's telling these stories. But just so that we begin to set context and humanize their narratives, I think it is only appropriate to begin to understand each of them and their work better by listening to their and what has got them here. And so, Lyric, if I may begin with you, can we begin with you, Lyric? Because, Lyric, are you there?
Yes, I briefly lost you, Charles, but I'm here.
He's there, Charles.
Oh, he's there. Okay. So, Lyric, what you shared the other day, it kind of hit me in the gut, So I don't want to give away too much of that, Lyric, about how you got into this. Would you, if it'd be okay with you, can you begin by sharing how you started your journey out here? Like I told you, it just hit me in the gut. Like it just hit me when you started speaking about it.
No, absolutely. Certainly will. And probably a decade ago or even 5-6 years ago, I never thought this is what I'd end up doing with my life. I'm an engineer by training, so some of the video that you played earlier certainly resonated really, really well with me. And kind of that principle of mind and hand is and kind of putting theory into practice is very much what the direction in life was going down, like kind of to innovate, to build technology, but wasn't really sure I'd be focusing it on this problem area. And really, it was a series of strange events that brought me to this. And some in the conspiratorial communities have called it the making of the Marvel supervillain, because obviously that's how they view me, and logically as a whole. But unfortunately, a bit of family tragedy back in 2014. My grandma, she was 86 at the time, but she still used WhatsApp, and she got this tirade of kind of WhatsApp messages saying, "Hey, drink the special green juice, give up your cancer meds, and you'll live longer." And we lost her a lot earlier than we probably ought to have. And at that moment in time, people didn't really think of things through the lens of misinformation or disinformation. I kind of put it as fraudulent activity online, and tried my best to move on. But the same kind of patterns began to reoccur, particularly in 2016. I have this vivid memory, particularly around the British referendum, the European referendum that occurred in the UK in 2016. Where I lived, where I called home in the UK, happened to be a place called Stone, the highest Brexit voting place in all of the UK, and where I was at the time, Cambridge, the highest Remain voting place in all of the UK. And I have this vivid memory of two friends from each locations sitting in my room with their social media feeds open next to me, and they had completely different information on them, wildly different information about obviously the impending referendum, both rife with misinformation, and obviously they made very, very different choices. And later it turned out that this wasn't just organic, and this wasn't just due to technical factors and technology limitations, but that there's been kind of outright campaigns and adversaries, both foreign and domestic, who've been involved in kind of shaping and manipulating those feeds. So really, that acted as a motivation for doing something about this problem area. And really, as it is with a lot of entrepreneurship, it was kind of a large problem area meeting potential solution during my research at CCEL at MIT, the AI lab at MIT, where we started experimenting with how natural language understanding and natural language processing, complemented with kind of subject matter experts such as fact checkers and open source intelligence analysts, could really move the needle on this problem to try and not just identify misinformation and disinformation, but also respond to it in a timely, effective, and proportionate manner. So it's been a bit of a journey over the last 5 years. Doesn't feel like 5 years, feels like a few decades, but keen to share a few anecdotes over the course of the session with everyone.
really looking forward to listen to some of those anecdotes. Lyric, like I said, listening to you, it was absolutely, it totally hit me in the gut. Lisa, I hope you managed to get some coffee. It's early in the morning, and I hope you managed to grab, you managed to just wake yourself up. You spoke about how you've lived in a dozen countries, and that has shaped what you do now. Can you take us through how that has shaped your thinking and where it has got you to what you do now? You had alluded to that earlier when you spoke about.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I appreciated hearing Lyric's own personal story. That was really helpful and interesting. Here, sitting in the United States, I work in the field of peace building, which has included working on the peace process in Afghanistan, in Fiji, in a number of different countries. And what we started realizing also 5 or 6 years ago is that technology, particularly social media platforms, were having a polarizing effect on societies. We saw it here with the US election, of course, just as with the Brexit campaign, where people got completely different information, and there were outside actors, namely Russia, who was trying to influence how US voters were going to vote. But yeah, then I ended up commissioning research in a dozen countries in the Southern Hemisphere because we didn't have a lot of information about what was happening with technology and peace issues in Venezuela, in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, Nigeria, Jordan, Egypt. And so we had local authors who were trained in peace building, it's a field which really tries to analyze the root causes of conflict and division within society, and look at sort of how to, intervene. And what we found country after country is that social media was making the existing fractures within the society, was making it worse. And it was often calling people on Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp were spreading false information and were goading each other into fighting and sometimes killing people. Often it was human rights workers or democracy activists. And so I have focused now on the role of technology in conflict, and also the role of technology in peace over the last few years. And so particularly for this audience, I'm quite interested in a field called peace engineering, which really looks at how engineers are trained and prepared to anticipate the negative impacts of their work, but also how engineers can learn more about sort of sociology, psychology, anthropology, so that they can build products that have a positive impact on society. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that. Thanks so much for that, Lisa. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your opening up on this one. I'm sorry, I've just turned my video off because my network, like I said, has been a bit of a cracker on me. Pranav, if I may just come to you, you have a equally interesting backstory as well. From the time you were at a realty startup, measuring the happiness quotient at places and looking at Google AdWords, trying to figure out what problem needs to be solved urgently. Can you take us through your thinking out there, and just how did you come about trying to solve what you are at right now?
Absolutely. I think, I always did want to become an entrepreneur, but, somewhere lost the lining in college, right? When everyone was speaking about jobs, placements, right? And that was most important. And I would say that even before I was lucky that, I started working at an early stage with this company called Zomato, which is right now one of India's leading unicorns at a very early stage, right? And, I think till date, I try to incorporate a lot of things that I learned at Zomato in terms of, focus on revenue, a well-defined culture. And post that, obviously, I was working at That's Realty. It was a real estate startup. We were looking at coming up with basic research reports about micro markets, especially from a real estate perspective. And then I had plans to go for my MBA actually, and I'd taken some time off from work, and that was the goal. That's when I think platforms like Ola and Uber, right, especially in India, had taken advantage of, I would say, something as simple as geolocation, proliferation of smartphones. We thought, why can't we couple this with digitization in the healthcare space, right, to shave minutes of the response time in an industry where the problems were much more prevalent. Um, Only upon initial research, I would say, back in the day, in 2016-17, we realized that the industry was, I'm talking about the medical transportation space now, was unreliable, unresponsive, unregulated, right, unorganized. And we had to find solutions to ensuring that people can get access, I would say, to medical transportation within minutes. And I would say that was the idea. And you know and then we started working on solutions to this problem, and started creating, I would say, basically a network of ambulances in the city of Delhi NCR. To start with, I still remember that, when we started, and it had been only 3 months, there was a lady who had called us, right. She was basically in her office, right, in this place in Delhi NCR called Faridabad actually. And she said, my mother is at home and she's fallen, right, and I cannot reach her, can you dispatch an ambulance quickly? And that's when we realized that we were able to allocate, I would say, or dispatch the closest ambulance to that person's location, right. And I would say the ambulance reached within 13 minutes, I remember, and before the lady actually reached back home, and we were able to then take the mother to the hospital quickly, right, also sharing information with the hospital about the incoming patient. That's where we realized that, of course, there is so much to do in this space, right, even by using basic technologies, geolocation, location based data, right, you can significantly improve the response time. And I also believe that help needs to be given when it matters the most, and I would say that's the idea driving us. Yeah.
Right, right. That's very fascinating, and it's uh, uh, Vignesh, you also had a very interesting narrative to share. An infosec engineer with an MBA in marketing who gets into a space full of regulations that are banned for all technical purposes. And I'm sure there are quite a few cricket buffs in there, but how would they know what you did? Can you take us through your story and what you did to get you here?
Absolutely, I think it's been a fairly interesting journey, I must say. So when I started off the typical Indian engineering and MBA route, where I did in my engineering in software. I worked for Wipro Technologies for about 5 years, and then I did my MBA in marketing. And I also worked in a shipping company for Maersk for about a couple of years. But then after a while, I decided to step into the whole startup space, because I thought that one can definitely express themselves, and you're definitely in a position where the things you do or the decisions you take will definitely have an impact on ground, and right there for you to see. So that's when I decided to take the plunge into the drone sector. I joined a startup called Quidditch Innovation Labs. I would encourage our attendees here to take a look. Pretty much every ICC event and every cricket event, the drone coverage is done by the broadcast is pretty much by Quidditch when it comes to drones. So that's how I started my drone career, fairly accidental. And then uh, when we actually did these initial operations, there was actually no regulation. So we were operating in a highly ambiguous space. Given that people didn't know much about it, and the only perception around drones was it being an instrument of war. People were a little suspicious, especially government, and especially around the whole regulatory regime around drones was quite grey. So, given that situation, we actually created an institution called the Drone Federation of India. In fact, I'm joining you from the annual festival called the Drone Festival of India, which was inaugurated by the which was today inaugurated by the Prime Minister as the chief guest. So we've actually created this platform to bring the public and the private sector together, so we could actually put out policy, help in policy advocacy, and help the government actually you know, touch base with the drone sector and come out with policy that is quite conducive, because this is an emerging technology, and you know, like any other, you know, emerging tech, like be it IoT or blockchain, it is something that gets ahead of policy, and you know, policy and regulations always play that whole catch up game. So that's how you know, I was part of the Drone Federation, and in my latest move, I moved to the World Economic Forum, where I've been around for about 3 years. More, and this is more around social impact. So one of the flagship initiatives that we've been
Choose the
working on
network
is called
also.
Medicine from the Sky, where we worked on, sorry, where we worked on medical drone deliveries, especially in rural parts of India. We recently completed around 300 sorties, you know, in the state of Telangana, in a remote district called Vikarabad. And you know, more than just delivery, the greater idea was to bring primary healthcare as close to the citizens' doorstep as possible. So that's the intent that we got into the initiative with. It also aligned with the state's objectives of being able to replicate, you know, or urban grade healthcare in rural parts of the country. Now that said, I think the job doesn't really end with just flying the drone and delivering the goods. There is a lot more backstage work and academic groundwork that goes into projects that are this complex. Very long story short is that uh, drones and aviation are a central subject, but healthcare is a state subject. So how do you negotiate the whole regulatory side of things? How do you sort of they bring in the aspect of how do you nurture the whole cooperative federalism side of it to make sure that clearances come through and you're able to be in full compliance with the laws of the land. So the collateral from this initiative was, over and above it being a social impact program, was also that it gave a lot of evidence for policy making, and that's largely how we get into our initiatives. It's been a fairly long journey, right from hovering around the corridors of the ministry to be able to come out with a policy that is tangible, robust, and now liberalized. So I'll pause at that, and also brief disclaimer, Charles. There may be some VIP activity around me, so you may lose me on the network. So I'm happy to take the Q&As as quickly as possible if it's workable. So thank you, thanks for the opportunity, and thanks to IET and Charles for this initiative. Charles? Hello? Suman, is it me, or can you hear me?
I can hear you, Vignesh. So I think we've lost Charles. I can't hear him either.
Oh, okay.
I think Charles is having a little panic
Charles is on mute.
here. Yeah. So in the meanwhile, while he comes back, I will bring in Dr. Lisa.
Suman, there was a question for I think Vignesh also, if you want to take that up.
Actually, we can. Usually, we take the questions once the session is over, but we can pick this up.
Yeah, Suman, I'll be happy if you can take the questions, because, like I mentioned, there's a bit of VIP activity around me. I may sort of lose connection.
I'll pick it up, Vignesh, for you. It says, I'll be interested to know this, Mr. Rajan Chatta, who is asking this, to know panel's view if there is a need for new generation frictionless digital fabric that facilitate tech for peace and trust everywhere. Anyone in real time for variety of applications, what this fabric could be. I'm just going to show it on the stage. This is what his question is. So it's not pointed towards any particular person. I think it's something unanimous. Any of you who feel that you would want to pick it up, you can pick it up and answer it.
Hi, I lost my network for a bit. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now, Charles.
I can
I don't
step
think
in
Charles
and
can hear
answer
us.
that question if
Yeah.
we want to keep this moving.
Yeah, Dr. Lisa. I mean, it was coming. I mean, we were coming to you itself. Charles had shared some of his views with me.
Lisa,
So
can you hear me?
we can all hear you, Charles. Go on, Dr. Lisa. It's about
Okay.
how similar or different are these narratives from where you are in the world and what you've witnessed?
Well, technology can play a positive role in building trust between different groups in society. And so I think the digital fabric is going to be very important for humanity as we move forward. But I think it's important that we realize that technology, it requires a lot of forethought and understanding about conflict in order to be able to build it in a way that it can actually build trust between people. So there are companies that are really trying to design for social trust and for social cohesion, which is, how groups relate to each other. So I just finished a research project interviewing 20 technology company staff from Silicon Valley, where they talked a lot about what they have learned about friction, actually. So the question was interesting because it sort of presumed that a frictionless digital fabric was necessary. And actually, a lot of what technology companies in Silicon Valley, like Facebook and Twitter, are doing is adding friction. And by that, I mean, they're making it more difficult to share misinformation, false information with huge numbers of people. So they're slowing down the sharing of viral rumors that might be causing violence, slowing down the spread of false information about COVID or vaccines or different things that actually might hurt society. So like friction is just like one affordance that the technology companies themselves can sort of design for that has an impact on peace and conflict. But there are many others. There's a technology company out of Oregon called Polis, POL.is, which has really designed its features, its affordances, to help polarized groups in society make decisions together and find the common ground in what they care about, so that they can actually reach agreement and sort of have an effect on policies by proposing a policy solution that works for all the different groups that are participating in a conversation about some problem. So for example, in Taiwan, when Uber came in and it was displacing taxi drivers, the government of Taiwan, the digital minister, actually used this platform, Polis, to bring all the stakeholders together. And they had a conversation online in which the features of the technology really help people listen to each other at scale. So it's listening at scale and it's finding common ground at scale, so that people can actually realize what they have in common and where there can be a policy solution that meets everybody's needs. So that's just a few of the digital features, the technology aspects that I've seen be very helpful in supporting peace.
Thank you, Dr. Lisa. While you're there, I would request you to stay at it, because there is something else which we wanted to ask you. Now, there is something very interesting that you said, and it got our attention. The elite have stopped using social media, but we cannot stop using that. I suspect many of them can do that, but for most people, we cannot. And if anything, like social media amplifies social schisms that already exists, how are we to think about it?
We need to be very careful how we use social media. I think those of us who sort of realize the potential it has to cause violence, but also to be a promoter of peace, we have a lot to learn. So digital media literacy, like how do we communicate on these platforms? How do we show somebody that we disagree with who's posting something? So here in the United States, we have all kinds of divisive issues right now, from abortion to how we teach about the history of race and racism in this country. So on social media, sort of how do we interact with people who have a different point of view? Do we, paraphrase and try to help them see that we understand where they're coming from, but we have a different point of view? So it's a lot of like using communication skills to to help others realize we're listening to them, we understand what they're saying, to ask questions, to be curious of others, and not just to go head to head and say, oh, you're wrong, I disagree with you. And, there's this tendency that social media conversations just degenerate to hateful rhetoric. So I think each one of us has a role in sort of slowing and taking the tone down, and really trying to understand and listen to other groups.
Wonderful. Yeah. Couldn't agree more with you there, Dr. Liz. Now coming, I think we'll come to the economics of tech. And, coming to that area, let me bring in Lyric again. Lyric, since we're talking about, the elite and not so elite, let us come to you. And as you look at misinformation and wage the war against it, it is an expensive battle to fight, as well as it would appear the battle looks loaded against you. So how do you manage this? What kind of economics of it all must make sense? How do you keep an eye on the bottom line and keep track of that? So the entire fact-checking network and the dynamics of this misinformation in social media.
Certainly, I think what will be helpful here is to extend the conversation to disinformation as well, because I think that's where there's probably a great degree of economic imbalance at the moment, particularly since 2016, mainly because of the perceived success of the Russian campaigns in the States. There's been so much investment by what we call the other side of the table, the agents of disinformation, within creating disinformation campaigns, within really bringing together a mini industry that creates disinformation. What's happened in that space is quite interesting, because probably around about then, the levels of investment were of the order of magnitude of 100 million. They blew past that really quickly to the order of a few billion. And right now they're reaching kind of low tens of billions of dollars in terms of what adversaries are spending at a minimum when it comes to these coordinated disinformation campaigns. What's also changed is who the actors involved are. It used to be about a dozen countries that had the capability to kind of project these kind of narratives and within their own borders and outside of their own borders. And that number is something like 85 or 90 right now. So it's an incredibly complex environment where there's been a lot of investment. One of the other traits that's interesting to look at from the economics of disinformation is, yes, sometimes people do create these campaigns and do create kind of clickbaity websites, not for geopolitical motive, but purely for profit, because sensationalist content pays. And it's pretty cheap to produce. You don't really need to put it through any rigorous ethics reviews or content reviews or editorial processes. You can just put anything that you think will get eyeballs and monetize it through ad tech. But equally, what's happened is a bit of what I like to refer to as the vertical integration within the disinformation as a service space. So you back in 2016, it was pretty well known that a lot of these operations outsource a degree of content production to Eastern Europe, to West Africa, to Southeast Asia. But really, what's happened from these organizations, these kind of freelancers and mom and pop shops, have gone from being kind of content body shops effectively to perhaps around 2019, 2020, to being people who organize campaigns all together. So, hey, what's the campaign you'd like? They go to various organizations, both public sector, private sector, to try and construct these inauthentic campaigns. And we're seeing it shift even further right now to say, and these organizations who are the agents of disinformation simply go to whoever wants to create a disinformation campaign and say, hey, what's your objective? What are you trying to achieve? And we'll try and engineer a campaign through whatever method necessary to deliver that objective. And that's really what's happened. So there's a thriving disinformation industry that's out there. And there is a degree of imbalance when it comes to those of us that are countering misinformation and disinformation. And some of that comes from the sheer need for volume as well as velocity in this space, kind of speed and scale in the way in which we're identifying a lot of these kind of harmful traits, whether they're in the content, whether they're in the account, whether in the activity. It's how do we conduct these assessments in a way where the unit economics of these still make sense. We can try and boil the ocean, but there's going to be a degree of prioritization that's going to be required in terms of which harms do organizations focus on that really move the needle. Maybe when it comes to things like violence, or when it comes to election integrity, or when it comes to foreign interference. So those are the kinds of initiatives that we've been involved in, and kind of the unit economics of fact checking, for instance. You can kind of compare that to almost the kind of ad tech CPM model. If that's the inherent value. Again, this isn't strictly true, because there's clearly a lot more value in journalism and investigative journalism than whatever, and then the routes through which it can be monetized. There are, I think I'm getting a bit of feedback. There are a bit of oh, perfect, thank you. There's a degree. So effectively, the industry that's mainly responsible for driving revenues when it comes to content production, it is the ad tech industry, and it is the subscription revenues. And it's if you look at all of that, it's of the order of kind of a couple hundred billion in terms of an industry. Even if we put all that together and we have kind of a lot of people literally fact checking every single piece of content that's coming out, the unit economics of doing that don't make sense. What we really need to figure out is ways in which automation can help, ways in which we prioritize what we go after based on risk, based on what claims are likely to lead to harm. And that's kind of what we've proven out in a couple of cases, particularly in the Indian context, kind of staying away from maybe the politics of the election cycles. During the kind of Maharashtra state election in 2019, we identified about 30,000 instances where there were purely like fraudulent claims about election dates being moved, polling stations being moved, polling dates being moved, polling booths being moved across various platforms. So to be able to conduct those assessments, obviously that through a purely manual operation would have exceeded probably a significant part of the budget that the election commission had to run the entire election. But through some clever use of technology, but also combining those with subject matter experts, social scientists, as well as fact checkers and open source intelligence analysts, we were able to produce those kind of outcomes. I think unit economics, as well as speed and scale, is something for us to really focus on when it comes to not just the identification of mis and dis, but the response to mis and dis.
Thank you, Lyric, for this wonderful insight. And now, Charles, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. In fact, absolutely fascinating. Thanks so much for that, Pranav, Vignesh. I'm sure there is much that you guys may share on this theme. Both of you had some absolutely fascinating anecdotes to share. But now, would you like to have a go at this one first? Because you made the point of having bootstrapped your way through building the entire infrastructure out. And I thought that was a very, very compelling one because we live in a world where venture capital funding is what everyone seeks as a badge of honor. But you've taken a contrary perspective and built it out. Would you want to take us through your narrative on this one?
Were you able to hear a little bit about on that, Pranav?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was just wondering if that was for me. I'll take that up. Of course, we started, right? It was very important to firstly, when you're starting out, identify how you want to run the business, right? Since my co-founder and I both are from a non-medical background, right? Of course, it took us some time to exactly learn how the medical transportation space works. Of course, we faced a lot of pushback initially, right? Even from, I would say, healthcare institutions, other people, right? In terms of getting the ball rolling, and how a person who's a finance major and a computer science engineer are going to transform or have any impact, I would say, initially in the medical transportation space. However, it was very clear that we believe that any breakthrough innovation in any space, I would say, does improve the quality, accessibility, and the affordability of any service. However, right, for the breakthrough to be truly great, it has to be, I would say, replicable, equitable, and sustainable at the same time, which was something which was very clear to us, right, when we started out. Also, the medical transportation space works very differently, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not a recurring service. So any amount that we would think of, right, to reach out to an end consumer would not basically come back to us, because you might need an ambulance tomorrow, you might not need it in the next 6 years. However, but it was very important for us to understand how we can build a base of a captive audience, right? So that people firstly have that kind of top of mind recall, so that they know who to reach out to when help is needed. And that's when we started working with, I would say, right from commercial, residential facilities, organizations for whom we are catering to the emergency needs of employees today, irrespective of location and time, insurance companies. We believe that a permanent integration with insurance in the future is something which is very important, right? To ensure that you can focus on exactly the dispatch process to make it a seamless cashless service, right, for the end consumer. And we're also working with state governments today. We've been able to, I would say, manage emergency response for governments in India, right? We're running the emergency response for the government in Delhi. We've been able to reduce the response time, I would say, in the city of Delhi from about 25 minutes to about 11 minutes today. Just coming back, right, as I said, you need to ensure that your business dynamic is right, you understand the industry well, right? And of course, I would say that today it's not negative to look at or positive to look at funding. It's just like what is needed for your organization. I think you always have a right time. And when we started seeing consistent growth and profitability in our organization, even we would want to now look at maybe raising money only to ensure that we can grow faster, right? And we've proven that an existing model is firstly replicable, as I said, and sustainable, and then it helps to I would say, scale this much, much faster, right? Once you've understood the industry well.
Thank you, there, Pranav, for that. Now, I think Vignesh is not there for some time. Coming back to Dr. Lisa, you've heard them speak now, Dr. Lisa, and you have a good view of how the entire ecosystem around which capitalist and the funding looks at business. Now, I understand that Silicon Valley has a mercenary feel and appeal to it from the outside, but you made the point the other day that things may be changing. What are the changes you are witnessing, and why is it changing, do you feel?
Well, many of the people who were in the industry early on made a lot of money in Silicon Valley, and now they are starting up venture capital funds, which are trying to fund technology for peace. And so just yesterday, I was on the line with the Be Kind Fund, which is part of Globant, and they're putting millions of dollars into new startups where the design of the engineering product itself is to foster peace, and to reduce polarization, to reduce disinformation. So they're looking to fund startups. You can go to the Be Kind Fund and look at what they're funding. But these are investors who are putting their money into startups that are looking to improve humanity. And this is a new era in technology. Sort of the first round of social media platforms, they actually did intend to be good, have a good impact on society. They Facebook's mission was to connect the world. And certainly there have been some positive impacts coming off of Facebook, but many people would call Facebook a weapon of mass destruction now. It is destroying democracy in many countries. It's undermining elections. It is worsening polarization in countries. Literally almost every country in the world now has some indicator that something is awry because of Facebook. So yeah, technology companies are now going to be financially incentivized eyes to think about peace as well.
Thank you, Dr. Lisa. And while you're at it, there's a question for you, wherein when we were talking about your views on the roles of engineers in maintaining peace through their work, technology, and the applications. However, how important is it that we have engineers in leadership roles supporting peacekeeping efforts and global politics? This is the question. I will have it on the stage just for your reference.
I'm sorry, I was having trouble to turn my mic back on. Yes, I think we need engineers and peace builders and peacekeepers working together. So we're setting up right now a council on technology and social cohesion, where we're interested in bringing together computer scientists, engineers with people who are working in the field of peace building, which is supported by the United Nations and many countries around the world, as well as many civil society organizations, creating a platform, a space for them to meet together, because we need each other to develop designs that are going to work to improve humanity and improve society's ability to solve conflicts without violence.
Yep. Thank you there, Dr. Lisa. Coming back to some of you there, there's some interesting questions here as I was just going through. And Vignesh, since you've joined, can you hear us?
Sorry about that. As discussed, as mentioned, I had a bit of a downloading issue. Yeah. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Vignesh, this is to you.
Yeah.
So when we talk about how drones can help in firefighting, and what kind of complications and the situations are about now, and there's one more which has come up from somebody who says that the issue with drone delivery seems to be that the packages don't have a safe landing area or a safe landing zone. They can't exactly open things and open mailboxes and doors or porches, which tend to be normally covered. So how do you overcome these problems? Maybe you can tell a little bit about the medicines and of the sky project, which was recently, I think, demoed at the World Economic Forum also.
That's right. Right. So I'll actually take the second question first.
Yeah.
Essentially, there are three non-negotiables, or three things that you look at when you look at a machine, especially a cargo delivery. Two is, what is the the failure rate or the probability of damage to anything on ground, and is there any severe damage to any critical infrastructure? That's all the question that's come through on whether the payloads are going to land or crash land on the ground, and maybe the consistency may change. Yes, that is a valid issue, but those decisions are taken beforehand. Right? If you're, for example, delivering vaccines or blood products, you definitely would make sure that the landing is soft. So I think a lot of this questioning is also coming from maybe ziplines videos that one may have seen on YouTube, where the drones are actually being dropped and the drones are going back to base. But you may also observe that there are parachutes attached to the payloads that are dropped off. So it's not entirely hard landing. Ever medical products of rather. Third is in its right. So yes, there are framework experiencely. A lot of learnings come through as you conduct pilots, which is what our medicine from the sky program was, which is why which is what also we've done over the years. Now that said, there's also the whole point around creating this library of use cases or a playbook. Each time a drone activity happens, one also needs to document what happens, and these are learnings that help future projects too. So now, if you look at manned aviation, for example, I mean, over the past several decades, there have been thousands of crashes, right? But now, today the probability of that happening is far less. So that's where we want through pilot. Sorry, Meena says, can you hear us?
Yeah,
Hello?
it's a little distorted,
Can you hear
Vignesh.
me?
We can hear you at times, but
Okay.
you're
So
breaking
I'll
at
pause
times.
at
So
that. Any counter questions to my last point around the medical deliveries? I'm happy to take it right away. If not, I can move to the second question.
sure. Will do. Thanks a lot, Vignesh. Uh, Charles, I can see you're
Yeah.
there.
So the
Can you hear us?
so there was a
Yes,
question
I
around
can. I
firefighting also.
can.
Right? I mean, that's the
Yeah, yeah. Just a minute, Charles. I'll come back to you. Yeah, Vignesh. So there was a question about how drone tech can help in firefighting, and what's the situation right now with
right.
the new policies and everything around it.
See, when you look at firefighting, this is an emergency response mechanism. So when you look at humanitarian efforts and projects or any or sort of use cases such as this, definitely there is a route of exemption. But definitely policy is not really hard and fast when you're in an emergency. So that's definitely a thing. But that said, in terms of operationalizing it, it's not. It's been tried in the past, and drones can get to places where humans and firefighters especially cannot. Definitely it plays a very important role. Even in fact, some of our initiatives in some initiatives we're working out in the US, we're looking to make sure that every firefighting station has a drone as part of its toolkit. So definitely the play is there, and again it's an emerging tech, and that will evolve as we get better. And, for example, also saw a lot of the forest fires in Australia and the wildfires in California 2 years back, which were sort of addressed using drones. So not just from spraying onto the fires and dousing them, but also understanding what the root cause of these forest fires are. Trying to map out the areas that are prone to this. So these are some very very pertinent and very important use cases. And
Thank you, Vignesh. I think we got most of it, and you can hear
line
me,
up that
right?
with policies in India, it can be amazing. I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, okay. I'm saying we got most of
Any
what you said.
further questions to me? I may have to actually. Thank you. If there are any more questions to me, I'm happy to take them right away.
Not as of now, Vignesh. I'll come back to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll check with Charles if Charles you can hear me.
Yes, I can. I'm terribly sorry about this. For some, like I said, I'm sitting on a cracker of a network which happens to be burning me through, and I'm struggling and moving all around the place trying to latch on to this. So my sincere apologies for this. I'm picking up things of picking up what you guys are saying in snatches. Um, and so I can kind of comprehend what's happening. So my sincere apologies for. I heard what you guys were talking is, there was something I about on thing I want to buy the role of on the economy part and the economics of it all. I just wanted to shift a bit to the role of regulation. Lisa and Lyric, I want to come to you on this one. The role of regulate platforms. Now, this is something both of you look at closely, and this is not an uncommon narrative if you look closely at all. Policy always lags technology lags. This is a point that the both of you made. Will the arc of this narrative change? How do you see it? Are you witnessing any signs out there?
Lyric, why don't you take this first?
Absolutely. I think there is there's glimmer of hope. I think in the regulatory space, particularly when it comes to MISTIS. I think we've all seen examples of really bad regulation in the space. I think so far. Certainly the kinds
that.
It
looks like Lyric is having trouble connecting here as well.
Oh, can you not hear me?
We can hear him, Lisa.
You guys can hear me?
We can hear you. Go on.
Great, perfect. Sorry, I'll continue.
Okay, I was waiting for Lyric. I was wondering if he would answer first, but
no, Dr. Lisa, Lyric is already speaking. Can you hear me?
I cannot hear him. No.
Alrighty, I'll continue. So I think when it comes to yes, bad regulation, it's the kind that we're seeing authoritarian governments put out there when it comes to using counter misdisregulation as a way in which such authoritarian governments can crack down on free speech. I think that's a big risk that occurs, that exists in the space, that exists around how mis and disinformation are going to be regulated. But I think there's the reason I say there's a glimmer of hope is kind of because we finally started seeing pockets of slightly more nuanced regulation starting to emerge. Particularly the Digital Services Act in the EU and the Online Harms Bill in the UK seem to be a step forward compared to a lot of the kind of legacy approaches that have been laid out, and that's fair. I think it's got solid bones. There's still work to be done on both fronts, but it's got solid bones for a couple of reasons. First off, I think when it comes to deciding what's true, what's not true, what's risky, what's not risky, that isn't something that platforms can continue to do because they've proven that they're not particularly good at it. And the other is that really governments are pretty conflicted when it comes to these kind of scenarios, and they probably shouldn't be the ones that make these decisions because of the potential for abuse. So really, it's something that requires third parties, either third parties, which will vary depending on the degree of trust, etc., folks have in and citizens have in institutions in each country, as to whether this is going to be a civil society-led initiative, whether it's going to be something that the private sector and a free market of multiple organizations could potentially lead on. So I think needs to be the core. It can't be left to the platforms. It can't be left to the government. It has to be third parties across civil society, private sector, and arm's length government bodies. The second is I think we shouldn't really be fixated by outcomes-based regulation in the space, but more by process-based regulation. What I mean by that is let's not go about trying to find platforms for every single piece of content or every single account, because guess what? That'll make them incredibly censorial. It'll be super easy for a platform to deal with that because the incentives to be over censorial are a bit tricky in that context. So, but what I mean by process-based regulation is let's audit them. Let's audit their systems. Let's figure out what content moderation systems they're using, what trust and safety policies are being upheld, to what degree of rigor, efficacy, timeliness, consistency. So that's really an interesting principle to bring to the fore. And I think finally it's data access. I think a lot of these challenges and problems are currently locked into platforms. And we're one of the few fortunate organizations that thankfully do get a few platform partners, and they open up to us. But I think a lot of this data needs to be opened up to the wider expert community, to regulators, to academia, to civil society for research purposes. And although platforms talk good game on this front, they really do need to do a lot more than they're currently doing. But I'll certainly pass back over to Lisa for a comment on this.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear most of what you said, Lyric. I don't know why. Your video wasn't coming through. But I caught the last end, and it sounded like you covered this topic very well. So I'll leave it with that.
Okay. Coming to Pranav.
If I may just stay with you on the theme, there was some interesting comments that you had to make about your area of research out here while on platforms itself and going forward on computational democracy and how you see the future given how platforms are evolving. Can you take us through the thinking around that, and what is it that you expect? And is there a glimmer of hope for all of us? Because the mainstream narrative is largely one of gloom and doom, and how much of us are giving us a lot of hope. It appear to be hopeless rather. So, what we be looking at it?
No, I think when we talk about misinformation and disinformation, it's very easy for us to talk about the doom and gloom, because yes, the problem is getting worse, and yes, there's more incidents right now, both that kind of tactical level in terms of violence to be it election workers, healthcare workers, vaccine sensors, etc., than existed 2 years ago. So the problem is getting worse. It's getting more complex. The adversaries are in a better position, and some technical factors are against us. So the top line statement, I think, is obvious. We're losing the war, but I think the glimmer of hope is certainly that way we finally started to win some battles, and there's playbooks are emerging for how to run effective counter-misdis operations, how to enforce and build a slightly more nuanced counter-misdis policy. And also in the regulatory space. I think, Charles, what you were referring to was potentially our case study in India around WhatsApp. And this has been a pretty thorny challenge around the misinformation, disinformation space, and how do we deal with closed networks? Because there's a lot of challenges. There's privacy, there's encryption, there's freedom of expression. There's a lot to deal with, and I think what we put forward during one of our election partnerships was really something to test out this hypothesis, which is currently one of the things that's limiting a lot of fact-checking operations in particular is the ability to respond to people in a timely manner. And by a timely manner, we really wanted to figure out what was most effective. Kind of, are we talking minutes? Are we talking hours? Are we talking days? How does people's engagement and resharing and re-forwarding within WhatsApp of fact checks change if we change that one variable, speed? And we developed in partnership with WhatsApp an automated fact checking tool that we gave access to about 10,000 people to in a state of, I don't know, like 100 million people. And we spread these people out kind of across various districts in the state. It acted as a way in which we could really, from the ground, get a lot of claims in. We built claim libraries and some automation on top of them to make sure that we were able to respond to people in a timely manner. And what we found was quite surprising. If we responded to a fact check within 30 minutes to 1 hour, it was 40 times more effective than responding after 3 hours. Like it's not linear. So if it's within that 1 hour, that is almost a couple of orders of magnitude of impact that we can deliver. I think it takes a lot to build an initiative that's able to do that. So there's still some work to be done to kind of road test that and get that peer reviewed and make sure it works in other contexts. But I think there's glimmers of hope that are emerging there. But equally, I think in the Ukrainian context currently, yes, there's a lot of challenges, and the information environment in Ukraine is incredibly polluted right now. But I think we're seeing some of the successes now of a lot of the resilience building initiatives that have been ongoing for the last 5-6 years. A lot of them finally paying dividends. Yes, some probably didn't work, but some have, and that's a great success story to be sharing. So I think I'm optimistic about our prospects. Yes, the background noise is still a gloomy picture. But I think that those battles and victories in those battles give me a glimmer of hope.
I can add something on there too. I think that
yes, please.
You know, we're looking at the power of data sets and large scale data processing to be able to find this kind of information. Also, based out of the University of Oxford in England is this program called Computational Propaganda, which is looking at how, you know, authoritarian regimes are using the power of computers to spread propaganda. But now there's another group of democracy activists who are starting this computational democracy. So how do we use the power of machines to create opportunities for more people to have a voice in the decisions that affect their lives? So I think there actually is a lot of hope for humanity that we can harness the power of computers to help us make decisions together.
Thank you there, Dr. Lisa. Charles, are you there? Okay. Coming to you, Pranav, you know, when we talk about pointing out, can you hear me, Charles? Okay.
Yes, Aman.
Okay, Pranav. So it's about, you made the point about having to station more ambulances per pin code than prescribed by the WHO in India.
Yes.
So what is the thinking here? And you also spoke about upgrading the paramedics. So just how do you see the future, panning out in these phases?
Sure. I think this was a conversation I was having with Charles as well the other day, right? And the idea behind having more ambulances per pin code than are actually required, I would say, because this is not a space where you can look at always utilization rates as the key metric, I would say, right, in terms of vehicles being stationed, right, and then trying to analyze if they are being utilized enough. That's why I feel a comprehensive partnership on the private side with the government, right, is very much important to create a holistic emergency response, right, that works, I would say. At our end, what we've tried to do is we've tried to create a voice of trust model at the front end, right? Because we believe that when someone is in an emergency, it's very important, right, to communicate with that person, and then we use most of the technology at our back end, right. Right from dispatching the closest possible ambulance, then sharing data about the existing patient with the drivers and paramedics who are within the ambulance, and then post that monitoring in terms of sending patients vitals. These can be basic oxygen levels, sugar levels, other important data points which can be shared with the emergency rooms of the hospitals, right? So they are more prepared about the incoming patient, I would say. I think such modules are very important even in the future, right? I would say. Hence, it's very important to integrate technology in emergency response, but also do it the right way, I would say. Today, we are also looking at building location-based technologies, I would say, to integrate with not only, I would say, smart applications, but also something like wearables, connected cars, home security solutions for that matter, right? So that data can be transmitted, I would say, location-based data directly to the public safety systems also. And this is not only for medical transportation, this can be helpful for both the police, fire, as well as the medical transportation space, right, in terms of handling the emergencies holistically, I would say here. And talking more about what else we can do in this space, as I said that remote monitoring is something we are very excited about. It's about combining firstly simple geolocation based technologies, then location based technologies, then also ensuring that you keep upgrading the quality of the ambulances as well, right? It's very important to have, especially in India, the right kind of medical professionals also who are equipping these ambulances, trained in basic and advanced life support. We ensure that there is not only basic certification that's always in place. The paramedics that we have are richly experienced also to handle all kinds of emergencies. Over and above, we've also created an emergency vehicle operations course for our ambulance drivers as well, right? So even they are trained in basic life support as well as patient handling, I would say, to ensure smooth transition of any emergency whenever it arises. Am I missing out on anything that you were asking? Feel free to remind me.
No.
Yeah.
Sure, Pranav. Will do. Thanks a lot. Charles, you there now?
Yes, Pranav, there was a very interesting point that you made while conversing. The whole point about having to navigate the Indian terrain, which is about, say for instance, do you see that changing in the near future? Given the way technologies are evolving, for instance, you see a lot of WHO prescribes a certain number of ambulances that must be had in a certain pin code, but you have as per those prescriptions you have an oversupply, but it has to do with a certain reality. Can you just take us through that, and do you see that changing, given how things are evolving?
Charles, I think I just asked him the same question. Probably you had not listened that time. I asked him the same
Oh,
question,
my
and
bad.
he's just answered it. So yeah, if you would like to move on to the
Happy to
next
just add
next,
a bit to
yeah, please.
since Charles is asked, right? I would also say that in India there are other.
Oh, my bad. This is technology. This is technology taking me the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that in India there are challenges in terms of terrain, even traffic conditions, right? I would say even awareness levels of the people in terms of who are on the road, right, which needs to keep improving. Something as basic as giving way to an ambulance. I think we are growing, right, from an awareness point of view. I would just like to say that I'm not saying that COVID-19 obviously issues, but also it did, I would say, expose some vulnerabilities in the healthcare system, not only in India but across the world, right? And post that, I would say awareness levels have actually gone up, which would only help, right, to build faster, I would say, quality healthcare in India even in the future.
Yeah. Thanks there, Pranav. I think we, in the past had some discussions around intelligent transportation systems and the Internet of Roads, and how important traffic management is, especially in a country like India when the urban cities and even the tier two, tier three cities are pretty polluted with the traffic, the kind of traffic conditions we have. Like you said, there is no dedicated ways or roads made for the ambulance. Whenever there is an ambulance, people will still give it way as we see it today. But there are people who would give an ambulance the way to go just to move faster behind them. So in a situation like this, when you talk about technology coming into play to with so much of regulations and so much of hindrances there right at the traffic level, uh, what do you think? I mean, in the next 5 years, if I have to ask you, not probably 10 years down the line or 15 years down the line, but from now in the next 3 to 5 years, what are the major changes you feel happening in that area, which is going to help you, cater to the healthcare sector even better?
Absolutely. I think firstly, initially, it is very important, right? These are problems that are there, right? I would say they're not only centric to India, they might be there in a lot of other countries as well.
I'm sure, yeah.
Firstly, what is more important, I feel, is to firstly provide basic help also, right? To ensure that whenever an emergency arises, a person has access to the right number, right? Or the service to get an ambulance, firstly. And as I would say that, once that challenge is over, then you can look at other ways to make the system work better, right? Wherein, of course, as I said, smarter coordination with government agencies, traffic police, right, in the future. Even having, I would say, air ambulances to be used for evacuation purposes also in the future would help to get to solve these issues, right? I would say in India today, air ambulances are not being used for evacuation purposes. I think, once that starts happening in the future, once we have sufficient infrastructure, this would also solve a lot of these challenges that exist. As I said, the idea is to keep working on step by step, firstly in this space, right? Because you need to ensure that the infrastructure is there. You firstly need to ensure that there is quality medical professionals, a network that works together, people knowing, as I said, who to reach out to. As I also spoke about, this needs to be integrated with insurance, right? With the penetration of insurance in India, which will be very important, right? To ensure that this is a basic service which should be available to everyone, I would say, right? Through a cashless facility. And
Yeah.
then I would say when once all of this starts happening, we will also see, of course, the infrastructure around it grow better, I would say. And then, as I said, we could also look at solutions which are specific to India currently, right, to tackle, as I said, remote monitoring, even air ambulances and evacuation are solutions that we can look at, right, to ensure that we can, solve the traffic problems or other problems in terms of terrain.
Yeah, yeah. So, coming to a question also, which is towards you, Pranav. When we talk about specifically India, obviously we're talking about the huge rural areas and the rural population as well. There are remote areas wherein you don't have the right connectivity, or you don't have the right kind of services, be it primary healthcare services
Yes.
or essential healthcare services to be delivered at the right time. So, how do you think your solution could be implemented in these areas wherein last mile connectivity is a challenge? How do you think we can reach out to these remote areas and give them access to quality healthcare in the least amount of time?
Absolutely, yeah. So, we've already worked with organizations, a lot of CSR funds as well to implement these solutions. I think someone's asked this question that if there is no connectivity, internet or mobile in rural areas, how do you implement your solutions, right? Of course, the idea there is to integrate a service directly with the primary, secondary health centers. Firstly, right, there are there in those areas to ensure that people know, right, where an ambulance is available and how they can get access to this help. Also, we've started working on, I would say, location-based technologies that work irrespective whether you have an application or not. We are also trying to get the location of the person directly via call, right, through other location-based technologies. I think that is more sufficient. Talking about rural areas, as I said, right, you need to work with the government and the private side to ensure that there is sufficient infrastructure in rural areas. But it's not only about having an ambulance. You also need a multi-speciality hospital, right, at the same time within the vicinity itself for that to make complete sense, right? So firstly, I would say that we also have to build I would say high quality healthcare institutions right close to these rural areas as well, so that because emergency or an ambulance can only do enough, and we do not want to increase a response time right by more than, I would say, overall up to 30 minutes. There are places where there is no healthcare multi-speciality hospital within an hour or two at times, right? So we need to ensure that we are building, I would say, smaller emergency centers, right, as a part of the ambulance infrastructure as well, to ensure that we can provide such services equitably, I would say, in the rural areas as well. And of course, sufficient work needs to be done with corporate CSR funds as well as the government to ensure that those problems can be solved as well.
Thank you there, Pranav. Quite intimating and insightful bits there. Now we've almost come down to the fag end of this. I mean, we had troubles connecting with a few people. We had troubles with network. As you guys were going on speaking, I was trying to find inner peace more than any other time. But coming to a last, which is a more of a generic question. When I was speaking with a lot of people about this topic today, there was some who said that tech for peace is a misnomer. Technology is always going to accelerate war, and though there is some substance to what the person said, I think there is a lot we can talk about when we talk about peace building. I mean, we saw through the pandemic that it's not only a war like the Russia-Ukraine war, which is happening right now, which calls for disaster management services, emergency services, which calls for so much of reforms in terms of technology and policy changing around it. So it was around that the pandemic, the disaster it created, a tsunami, a major earthquake, or a huge calamity that takes place, which puts our entire system around the economy in disarray. So I feel when you talk about technology for peace, it's just not about fighting wars or preventing wars or post-war services, but it's also about all of these major things which are happening around us. But if I have to ask this question to you, and as a final thought, I'll leave it to all of you. Uh, what is it that you feel that when we talk about technology will always accelerate war and not peace? What are your views about it? Starting with Lyric, and then we can go with Dr. Lisa, and then Pranav. And Charles, if you can hear me, then coming back to you to round it off.
That's a tricky one, right? Because although that we create technology to help enable peace in pockets, and there's many organizations such as ours that help do that and help achieve that. So technology to try and do that definitely exists, but I think perhaps your question's a bit more macro than that. That is technology as a whole a net contributor towards kind of conflicts or towards peace, and that's a tricky one.
No,
especially given.
Also, Lyric, should it be more reactive in nature rather than being more proactive? Because most of the times, we always are very reactive with technology. When something's happening, then we react with it. So should we be more proactive with technology now that we have, so much of advancements in technology through AI and machine learning and robotics and automation, everything that we talk about in future tech? So what do you think is being proactive with technology, which is to counter conflicts or disaster managements for the future?
Sure. I think again a generic point to start with. Perhaps it's the rate of technology innovation isn't slowing down anytime soon. It's only increasing. I think we just need better systems, controls, governance, ethics reviews, etc., around how we build, deploy any technology. And I think we're certainly in a better place we're now than we perhaps were 5-10 years ago, where a lot of scrutiny is paid, particularly when it comes to say the field of artificial intelligence, around things like fair ML, explainable AI, around bias within data sets, bias within engineers. These are topics that people are incredibly aware of. So although that doesn't mean that whatever technology is built doesn't have potential for misuse, that's clearly possible. But again, those governance systems should hopefully help address that. But it kind of needs kind of technology leaders to have a seat at the table and to be an active participant when it comes to a lot of how policies around how such technologies are going to be deployed in either a warfighting scenario or a peace building scenario are going to be deployed. I think like one like very practical example of some good controls that we've kind of not we personally, but kind of the industry has managed to achieve is when it comes to the deployment of artificial intelligence in the DoD. For instance, you would have thought we were in kind of some weird cyber land right now where there's the potential for fully automated war. No, there's clear guidelines and rules that mean that cannot happen. A warfighter, i.e., a person, is there will be a person who will be who will need to pull the trigger. Yes, there'll be AI and all that kind of stuff that will and analytics and simulations that will help guide decision making. But ultimately, technology is meant to be a force multiplier for people. And if we have more people in the world that are looking for ways in which we can move towards peace rather than move towards conflict, I think that'll probably dictate the sum total of what overall technology can do. So hopefully more people joining organizations with that as their mission as opposed to conflict as their mission.
Yeah, that was well said, Pranav. Lyric, thanks a lot. Dr. Lisa, coming to you.
Well, I like the idea of a computer being a force multiplier. So somebody said that a computer is a bicycle for your mind. So it matters what direction you're biking. I think most technologies are dual use. They can take us in the direction of war and violence, or they can take us in the direction of peace. And it's why it's so important for an organization like IET to have a panel like this and to talk about how engineers might learn a bit more about how their products they're making can impact the world in negative and positive ways, and that the more intentionality that the engineers have, the more likely that we'll be harnessing that power for good.
Thank you, Dr. Lisa. Thank you so much. Pranav, your views on this?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I would just like to say that any advancement in technology, right, that's been happening over the years does make things easier, right, for people, individuals, maybe organizations, any other stakeholders. But it also brings in a lot of vulnerabilities, right, simultaneously into the system, right. We've seen this enough, right, from data. Personal data to of course now today we are talking about so many other safety measures also to be incorporated in a world where hacking has become I would say something which is also increasing in terms of advancement with the technology, right. So obviously we are looking at curves, I would say, in this space, but of course it's very important to understand that the system will become more vulnerable, but it's at the same time we should concentrate also on the good parts, right, how we can use technology. As I said, since the agenda is tech for peace, right, we should look at how we can use network analysis, a lot of conflict resolution, right, at the same time, which will be very important. Also, maybe, how we can use satellites, other bits to ensure that, we can highlight any kind of human rights violations, any other problems that are existent, right, to solve, I would say, these issues via technology. Also, in maybe the medical transportation space, to look at, since Vignesh is not here, but to look at maybe drones, right? I would say these today, drones, especially for commercial purposes. Now, we've been using drones. The army has been using drones right across the world, but now it's time that we can use this for slightly good impact, I would say, right? and we can ensure in the healthcare space that medicines, even ambulances, other bits can reach people faster, right? Via such technology. So I think we should talk about what are the positives. Of course, the understanding should be that it would make it more vulnerable at the same time, but we should concentrate more on the good parts, right, and how we can keep working on that, I would say.
True. Thanks a lot. I
And
think Vignesh would add.
pleasure, being here with Lyric and Dr. Lisa, right? I think, a lot of good points they've made around this, and I think, pleasure being on the panel with them.
Thanks a lot, Pranav. I think Vignesh would have echoed on that. We recently at the World Economic Forum conclave, which is happening at Davos, there was a demo of the Medicines from the Sky project that was initiated by them in Telangana, which is a state in India, Dr. Lisa and Lyric. So they have tried to deliver medicines from the sky for the first time using drones, and that was shown there, and how that can be replicated in different parts of the world, in areas where these kind of supplies can't be reached, or remote areas. And this is something that has been tried out, which has been a success. So that's a great success story, for them to talk about. We have seen in the last 2 years major policy changes when you talk about drones and aviation. You've seen major policy changes around telehealth and telemedicine, especially when we talk about healthcare. And now you see more and more people opt to go for the digital version of visits with the doctor, or virtual visits with the doctor, between a doctor and a patient, and how things can be accelerated when you talk about essential or quality healthcare. So yeah, I resonate with all of you that technology can be used for the good or the bad, but it is people like you and experts such as you who are trying to use technology as far as possible in the right direction, to motivate the right kind of people in various parts of the world to take up technology for good, and not as a reactive measure but also as a proactive measure. So kudos to all of you, and thank you so much for being part of this elite discussion and our 50th episode for the Digital Conversations. I'm sure Charles would have said the same thing, and it was unfortunate, the glitches we had today, but such is technology. But having said that, we will like to thank the people there in the audience who took their time out to join us. We have gone live across our Facebook and YouTube channels, so this is a recorded session. You could all the time come back on these channels and the IT channels, and you can watch this whenever you are free. And do write back to us and share your feedback about the session and what could be done better. We will keep on doing such sessions throughout the year on how technology can be applied to transform industries, transform societies, and solve challenges that matter, because that's what we want to do here with the IET. On that note, thank you so much for joining us, and wish you all a very happy weekend. And until next time, we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Suman. Pleasure.
Lovely
Thank you.
talking to you.